Good evening. Today is May the 5th. My video today is why Christians? Sometimes people wonder why we are called Christians since Jesus was a Jew. There are a couple of reasons. One, that originally that they were in fact a sect of Judaism until they were thrown out of the temple. Now, Messiah is the Hebrew name for the Anointed One. In Greek, that is Christ. So it follows that they would be called Christians by those who spoke Greek and were Gentiles, not Jews. We're also anointed ones because of our baptism. We often call the day of our baptism the day of our christening. We are anointed with the faith of Christ, the Anointed One. Christ is sometimes thought of as Jesus' last name. Actually, it's his title. In Jesus' time, the last name usually referred to something descriptive. One's occupation, the place where a person came from, or his father's name. The people of his time would have called him Jesus Bar Joseph and Jesus the Nazarene. Remember, Jesus was called the carpenter, or Joseph was called the carpenter. Names were considered to be very important. In many cultures, a person may have 4 or 5 names. The relatives may have some say in the naming. A person may have names that include blessing, merciful, gift, or beautiful, qualities that they either believe the child has or will develop, as well as the name he or she will be called, and then the family name. Different cultures even put the family name first. Our names are so important that the Jews will not call God by the name he gave Moses. That is why Jewish leaders were so upset when Jesus called himself, I am. The people of Antioch were convinced by Paul and Barnabas that Jesus was in fact the Messiah, the Christ, and so the followers were so named Christians. When we get down to it, Christian is, in a few words in the English language, that carries as much baggage as this one. It's loaded, label, to be sure, but what's interesting is that Jesus never actually gave a name to his followers. The early church never called themselves Christians. In fact, the title most often used was saints. The Greek word for saints, hagios, which means consecrated to God, holy, sacred, or pious, it almost always used in the plural, as in saints. This reflects not just the individual, but the connection to a group of people set apart for the Lord and his kingdom. Beginning with Adam's first task of naming the animals throughout human history and even today, the creation of a new name or title is significant. A name is embedded with the deep meaning drawn from experience that help define reality in language we can understand. The early church was called Christians by powers that be for the first time in Antioch in Acts 11, verse 26. It wasn't a name Jesus' disciples gave themselves. It was a name given to them by society in Antioch. But why a new name for this group of Christ followers? Why, from the perspective of outsiders, were they simply lumped in with all the other variants of the Jewish faith? Some cultural context might help. Antioch was referred to as all the world in one city, where you could see all the world's riches and diversity in one place. And the marketplace was its hub. Antioch was designed like most cities of the day, a circular wall on the outside, a marketplace in the center, with the interior of the city walled in a way that divided different people groups from one another. That always bring to mind this map of Chicago divided by race. Enter Christ followers. Enter the gospel. The church came to Antioch and began breaking down the dividing barriers in a way that upset the society's existing categories. People from all parts of the city, Jews and Gentiles alike, were suddenly coming together. This group of people were redefining community in a radical and unprecedented way, so much so that a new word was needed to categorize what in the world was happening. What's interesting here is that there were so many offshooting sects within Judaism that Antiochians never bothered to learn or categorize differently. But in Christians, they saw something different. The term Christian comes from the world's realization that something new and unheard of was happening. It is often assumed that the name Christian was given somewhat flippantly or even derogatorily, but these powers that be, a sort of dismissive wave of the hand to those little Christs, technically the ending "ian," Christian, means belonging to the party of, so Christians meant those of Jesus' party. After Acts 11:26, the word Christian was used only 2 other times in the New Testament. In Acts 26, verse 28, by Agrippa, an unbelieving king that applied the name he knew as an outsider. And 1 Peter 4, verse 16, in the context of being opposed or being oppressed in wider society under that given name. In each reference, the emphasis inherent in the original Greek is on the fact that the people from outside the faith recognized Christians as a distinct group. In Galatians 2, verses 11 through 17, we can see just how central the diversity of the Antioch situation was to the definition of what it meant to be a Christ follower. Peter, who had been living side by side with the Jews and Gentiles, broke the unity of the community when he chose to withdraw from the Gentiles to kowtow to a group of conservative Jews who had come to town. Peter was afraid, verse 12, of what this group would think or do. This led other Jewish believers to do the same and withdraw from their non-Jewish brethren. Peter has a record of struggling to get his heart to change in line with what he knew to be true. This case was no different. Paul confronts Peter on this and admonishes him publicly in order to set the record straight in verse 14, calling his behavior hypocrisy. Calling Peter out in public was harsh, but the future of the Gentile Christians was at stake. The Gentiles from whom Peter withdrew got the message loud and clear that they were somehow second class, which is clearly out of line with the gospel. Where there is division, the gospel brings unity. Where there is brokenness, healing. The racist split Peter caused among the people suggested that the church really wasn't any different from the rest of the world after all, giving others a reason to say, so what, to just another belief system. Division along racial lines is not just different, it's an affront to the gospel itself and betrays its definitive distinctiveness in the world. In response, Paul reaffirmed the unity of the body, the centrality and sufficiency of Christ, and the unique inclusivity of the new community of those called Christians. He took the social division of the world seriously, and so should we. Are we living up to our given name? Do our cities look like Antioch, or do our churches do our hearts? Do we defy the world's categories? Are we able to show the world a vision of community in which there is no social, economic, racial, or gender division? Galatians 3:28, Colossians 3:10 through 11. Or are we actually serving as instigators of the division? Perhaps this is why you hear some Christians turning from that name, giving rise to phrases like, "I'm a Christ follower, not Christian," because they no longer like what it means to be Christian from the world's perspective. Ancient Antiochians may have given us that name because of early Christians' radical inclusivity, but today it's up to us to keep that reputation alive, because the Christian label is ever redefining based on the reputation we give it. According to John 13, verse 35, Jesus says, "The world gets a vote as to how they will know we are His. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." And today, it's up to us to recover that distinction, to defy the world's categories against us once again. Something to think about. I heard this been quite some time ago, but consider, if you were brought up on charges of being a Christian, is there enough evidence to convict you? I love you. Pray blessings over you, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.